Well, hello and welcome everyone. It's time to get our webinar started. We're very glad that you're here. My name is Greg Forster and I am the director of the Oikonomia Network, which is a network of theological educators and schools dedicated to connecting theological education to the way people live in the modern world. We talk about things like fruitful work, having wisdom about social systems, like economic wisdom, serving the common good, authentic visions of human flourishing. And one of the most important conversations that we steward is about the future of theological education and how we can perform our professional calling better for the 21st century as we bring the theological knowledge tradition forward in God's plan. Quick reminder, I'd like to ask you to keep your Zoom set to mute if you are not the person speaking. We appreciate that, minimizes feedback problems. The webinar we are having now is part of a series. We had one already in February, and that video is available on our YouTube channel, Tom Tanner of ATS. We had a fascinating conversation with him about the new ATS standards and what they mean for the future of theological education and the opportunities that they create for us as educators. We have one more coming next month, and I'll tell you a little more about that at the end. But this is the middle webinar of the series, and we are recording it so that if you are worried about taking notes and getting everything down, don't worry about that. We're going to post a video of this conversation on our YouTube channel so that everyone can join in the conversation. So we're really glad to have you here, and I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague Donald Guthrie here at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, who will be moderating the webinar this morning. So Donald, take it away.
Great, thanks, Greg. As Greg said, this is the second of our webinars this spring. Our topic is what I wish my president, dean, or faculty member knew in the new reality. We have invited Dr. Barry Corey's president of Biola University, and Abson Joseph, Dr. Abson from Wesley Seminary, he's the dean there, and Dr. Ellen Marmon, a faculty member at Asbury. So thank you, colleagues, for joining us for the conversation. As we all know, this was all challenging to us before COVID, let alone in the midst of and looking forward to post, what it means to work together toward our institutional mission, our collaboration within our institutions and collaborations and partnerships beyond. So in the few minutes we have today, I'll be asking our panelists some questions about their own role, their own contributions, but also, as we've said, kind of what they wish their counterparts would know in the system. So thanks again for joining us. Let's talk about a few challenges first, and then we'll talk about good news stories, but challenges first. What challenges have you been facing in your own role, be it president, dean, or faculty member, that you would want those in other roles to know about? Anybody can jump in and start us off.
Well, I'll dive in. This is Barry Corey from Biola University, and Biola has an embedded seminary, Talbot School of Theology, and our outstanding dean is Clint Arnold, and many of you probably know Clint. So yeah, Greg and Donald, thank you, and Abson, Ellen, good to be on this webinar with you. I have great respect for TEDS and Wesley Seminary and Asbury Seminary and the Oikonomia Network. So it's great to be on this call. I think first of all, I'm going to learn a lot today. I think all of us as presenters, it looks like we're sitting in front of bookshelves as I'm looking around, and it means I think we like to read and we like to learn. So I am looking forward to learning. I think I would have for you, Donald, my old friend Donald Guthrie, it's good to see you again. Maybe a vulnerable answer and a strategic answer. I think the vulnerable answer is, I think it goes without saying, but the burdens for presidents are greater than ever. As my old boss, Bob Cooley, longtime president of Gordon Conwell, said, that we bear a burden of accumulated grievances, the most difficult, intractable problems that are not resolved elsewhere end up on our desks. That's one burden. We have a burden of conveying both hope and reality at the same time. And to carry both of those buckets of water equally is a challenge for us as presidents, because we tend to maybe want to go more towards hope and kind of downplay the very harsh realities that we're facing. There's a burden of anxious constituencies. Faculty, we've been remote for an entire year per order of LA County Department of Public Health. So we haven't had anybody on campus except for this semester. They're starting to repopulate a little, but all of our Talbot classes at the graduate level are all still remote. So we have faculty remote teaching and staff concerned about jobs and student social isolation and donors on how we're responding to race and politics and trustees on reimagining the institution. So these are very real burdens that we are carrying, and not to mention the burden of loneliness, because as presidents, we have no peer at our institution, and it's a weighty place to be. So understanding these, maybe for faculty and deans, it's good to understand these like intellectually. I know you can't understand them existentially until you're in this role. And I was a longtime dean at Gordon Conwell, and I'd heard presidents talk about these challenges and didn't fully grasp them until I was in this chair. So maybe that's a short answer, and I can save my strategic one for later so I don't take up too much time, Don.
That's great. Thank you.
I think from a dean's perspective, this is Abson Joseph. I'm at Wesley Seminary, and also Wesley Seminary is embedded within Indiana Wesleyan University. So in the context of challenges, I think keeping an eye on the big picture and while attending to the tyranny of the urgent, I think as a dean, we kind of are the person in the middle, who's both in terms of, we have reporting relationship towards the president in terms of fulfilling the larger vision, but also we care for the faculty and try to implement the mission of the school while also caring for students and the curriculum as a whole. So the burden of finding balance between implementing the school's mission while caring for the faculty, caring for students, caring for the institution. So like in the context of COVID, for example, even before that, so everyone is spread thin, and the psychological impact of the pandemic is perhaps something that's understated at times. So we had to ask more of ourselves, we had to ask more of the faculty. Then how, as a dean, then how do we do everything in our power to help students thrive while also promoting self-care, asking the faculty in terms of the care for themselves and keeping the faculty from burning out. And then in the context of being embedded, we are in a really, really great situation as Wesley Seminary, but then they're still trying to figure out like how do the processes that we want to put in place that will help our students. We still have another layer in terms of how those things fit within the context of the larger university, their mission, and which is also ours, but in terms of operational processes, sometimes navigating these things and negotiating those processes can be challenging.
That's great. Thank you. Ellen, how about you?
Yeah, I'm Ellen Marmon, and I'm a professor of Christian discipleship at Asbury Theological Seminary. I also direct the Doctor of Ministry program, and we are a freestanding seminary, so that eliminates one layer of complexity. A couple of things come to my mind when I think about the challenges to faculty during the last year. One is just this reality of now offering courses 3, 4, 5 different ways, and sometimes feeling the tension between, okay, this one needs to be hybrid, this one has to be all online, this one was supposed to be in person, but now it's all on Zoom. We are sort of, I think, sometimes stuck between a sense of, do our deans and does administration, do they really understand that it's not just about relocating content, but that with every new platform of delivery, it's a do-over. It's a start from scratch. And so Abson, you mentioned kind of that level of fatigue that has set in, trying to be respectful of that for everyone. but certainly weighing all those delivery systems then with this mission of wanting to really connect and spiritually form our students. And so my question was, when this all started, was how do you do camp online? Because in some senses, that is what we were needing to do, especially in our Doctor of Ministry program. So a lot of pivoting, and I think that's been our primary challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Let's talk a little bit more, kind of a little bit more about challenges in terms of collaborative activities within the institution. I'll mention a little bit about that, but let's talk a little bit more about that. Maybe toughest challenges when it comes to collaboration. I recently had a colleague say to me how hard it was to respond to requests from admissions to talk to a prospective student, and from financial aid to talk about a student in need, and from on and on and on and on, with little to no opportunity to see anybody face to face for the last year. I know that's been one of our great challenges here at Trinity. What are some of the things that you all would say about that one? Ellen, why don't we start with you this time?
All right, so I'll get us started on this one.
Okay.
We have 5 schools here within Asbury, and I think our deans have done a good job of staying in touch with each other. But just like you said, Donald, the challenge has been interdepartmental. What I've learned is we just absolutely have to over communicate. That silence, it's amazing to me, even in just a really great community, silence can be filled with negative anticipation. Like if we don't hear from administration about issues regarding budget, or if we don't hear from dean about issues of, say, new course caps that have gone up, then I think, especially with the weariness, what happens is this, okay, the story in my head about that is, and unfortunately, it tends to go to the negative. So just knowing the why behind decisions is a huge help in communicating. And I think maybe that needs to be in videos as well as emails or synchronous meetings.
Yeah, thank you. Abson or Barry, how about you all?
I think the challenge for us, like Wesley Seminary, we started with the online modality. Like when we started 10 years ago, we were already online. So with like COVID didn't present a challenge in terms of modality for us. And while our students are in their context, our faculty also are here. And we had 2 faculty members who were remote. And last year, before COVID, the faculty chair decided, well, let's just do Zoom meetings. So even before COVID, faculty meetings, we were already living in terms of what does it mean to live like our students. So it was very easy to adapt. The challenge for us was, how do we adapt our courses and how we delivered them in order to help our students succeed? And that's what the problem was in terms of, okay, now how do we deliver things differently? For example, we have our MDiv is fully in Spanish. And up to this point, the Spanish language students were experiencing the LMS in English. So then how do we use this opportunity to kind of fast track some of these processes? There were things that we wanted to do both curricularly and otherwise that the COVID situation kind of allowed us to actually adapt. I won't say pivot, but kind of adapt. And it was helpful to actually look at these, and in the context of embeddedness, there were things that we felt like we needed to do, but at a scale of 500 students, while we embedded like IWU, which has, for the national and global, that has 10,000 students, there are things that we felt like, well, this is easy to do, but no. If we push this button, it impacts 10,000 other students. So then we had to now engage in conversations about scalability, like what are services that we need to bring in-house, because those services, we can care for those students ourselves. What are other things that will benefit the entire university? So now we're having conversations about systems that need to be bilingual for all of our students, and having the LMS, we were able to roll out the LMS in Spanish in January. So these are things that we're able to have conversations about and are making good progress.
Yeah, thanks. We've noticed that too, that you always knew everything was connected to everything, but now you really know everything is connected to everything.
Yeah.
And if you pull it here, it pulls over here.
Yeah.
Barry, how about you?
Yeah, let me zoom back a little bit. I so appreciative of Abson's words and Ellen's as well. I think we are all undergoing like major re-engineering and transformation at our institutions to try to, navigate for not only a surviving future, but a flourishing future. And I would just add to that the obvious that deans and faculty know, and that is the president's role really is to hold in trust the institution's mission in the midst of all these changes. And the changes are obvious, right? There are demographics and emerging non-traditional competitors we have in economics and affordability and new technologies and globalized educational inequities and so forth. So there are profound challenges, and with the struggle to reinvent ourselves, both because of the pandemic and just these long-term disruptions that theological schools have been facing, it is the president's responsibility to make sure that we don't take our eye off the missional ball. So I think I just need to say that, and just to encourage any presidents that are listening to make sure that is a shared priority with all of the adjustments that are being made to the way in which we do education. It's similar to what Ellen said about we have to talk about the why we're doing what we're doing. And sometimes we conflate the how and the why. So if we focus on our mission and adapt new methodologies that accelerate our mission, this is what we're talking about. This is stewarding the university well, or the theological school well. But if we focus on methodologies of the past, we're going to be irrelevant in our mission. I just think that has to be said. And I appreciated Ellen's comments about the role of communicating. And I do think that the president needs to continually see herself or himself as the chief ambassadorial officer inside the university and outside as well. Since COVID began, just as an example, we've had these weekly and then bi-weekly, now monthly, all community conversations by Zoom. And we've had up to 1,100 of our faculty and staff sitting in on these. And we must have done, I don't know, 30 or so of these since a year ago. And when in the past, we'd have like these all community conversations in person on campus. We'd make like 4 a year. But we just realized early on the need to communicate clearly and to keep the missional part central. So I take the first 10 or 15 minutes and just say, this is where we are. And this is where I try to talk about both hope and reality anchored to our mission. And I think if there's ever a time that the first principles, the mission, the founding vision of the theological school needs to be out there, it just helps remind people that we're not going wayward in all of these changes and all these disruptions and all of the conflictions that COVID brings upon us. So just just as I talked to Abson as a representative of a dean and Ellen as representative of a faculty member, like this is what presidents need to do now more than ever, as they are the chief ambassadorial officers internally as well as externally to our constituencies.
Yeah, thanks. That tension to hold on to a mission with flexibility, it's just always it's just art and science and everything else. Hendrickson from Penn State, in his book about administration and higher education, talks about that hard challenge of hanging on the tension of absolute mission with flex, and then you can't do it by yourself, so you need partners too. All the above. Speaking of partners, What have you noticed going well recently? You've already mentioned a few things, but what's been going well regarding institutional collaboration among the various offices and departments and administration and faculties and boards and so forth? What have you noticed that would be helpful for others to hear about, that the Lord's blessed you all in your institution? Abson, why don't we start with you this time?
Sure. I hinted at it earlier. There were things that we felt that were pain points, but then as we raised those questions, it became clear that those pain points were not just Wesley Seminary students. There were things that IWU students needed to benefit. So the president of the university then, instead of just addressing this for Wesley Seminary, then created space for all the units to come together to ask, okay, what are the implications for these things for IWU students as a whole? I mentioned earlier, in terms of, right now, we already now have Brightspace, which is our LMS D2L in Spanish, which will benefit not just Wesley Seminary students, but the National Global also has students in Spanish language programs that they want to offer. We're looking at like the operational aspect of things and looking at what are the gaps in terms of how students experience the university as a whole. So there's been a really good collaboration that's happening at the university level that will help benefit us. There were also good collaboration by National Global used to offer our services both in terms of financial aid, student services, student success, and for them to say, okay, these are the things you could do yourself. How do we separate these things? And then we've been now hiring people internally who allow us to kind of have really high touch processes for our students. And then those processes are then we're learning from each other. Oh, it is happening well for you. Then how then we bring that the entire university can adopt those things. So really good conversations that's happening, and with IT, with student success, with financial aid, and it's been a very good process to see.
That's very encouraging.
Yeah, I'll jump here. I love having an appreciative question in here. So being able to talk about what is working, I think sort of tailgating on what Abson has already said, and also Barry, what you mentioned earlier, is just those extra efforts that are being made by our administration, our president, and our provost. Will join a school meeting each semester, and we're doing some synchronous tea, sessions where we just bring a cup of tea or coffee, and we have, I think, access. Again, that access is so important to the president, to the deans, to our academic provost. Then for me, one of the most enjoyable things that has come out of this is faculty from the different schools getting together on a pretty regular basis on Zoom, but talking about how we're teaching. And my background is education, so I love that, but it's not necessarily the conversation we have with our faculty friends all the time. But now, since we're doing new things, new iterations, we really are needing to learn from each other. And so we just get online for 45 minutes or whatever and say, what are you doing that works? And we're all in a position of feeling kind of vulnerable. And so we're really ready to learn from each other. So that's, I think, and our IT people have come to that as well. Instructional design folks have been able to speak into that and help us. So knowing what we don't know has brought us, to some Zoom meetings to learn from each other.
Great, thank you. Barry, how about you?
Yeah, it was probably about 6 months before COVID happened that we as a university began this major transformation process of what does it mean to have different structures and accelerate sluggish practices, just a lot of the ways in which we are trying to anticipate the disruptions that are coming and be well prepared for them. And then COVID came and COVID really wasn't the change. COVID was the accelerant of the change. And so I'm saying all this because I think a lot of presidents have been just so preoccupied with trying to navigate these new and emerging realities that we need like strong Absons in our administration to help us hear the voices of the faculty, that sometimes it's not intentional, but just because of margin, we're not listening to. And so we have a provost here at Biola, works with all of our deans. We have strong deans that are communicating well with each other, and to her and she to me. And I just think that, you know, what Abson said a little bit earlier about the dean or the provost leading from the middle or leading from the center in a kind of a swivel chair, like presidents need deans like that and provosts like that, like more than ever, because it's not our intention to not listen well, but I do think our preoccupations and our limited margin right now has, and that could come across, you know, as Ellen was saying, that you know, we're not communicating well, we're not listening well. And so I do think like brutally honest conversations at the administrative level so that presidents can really hear what's happening, done obviously in a spirit of Christian love, make a big difference to us. We need to hear. Again, it's not because we don't want to, it's because we have limited capacity, I think, right now to do that. One of the things, so listening well has been, I'm trying to make that more of a priority. But one of the fun things that we've been doing, or helpful things, is we've been having more and more ideation sessions, and, you know, within schools. And I'm really thrilled with the faculty who have embraced this challenge. It's a hard time to do that when you're so many other demands, but as I said, we've been remote all year, so that forced change has been upon us, and we're all thinking creatively anyway. So we ask schools, like, what are some new ideas that we are learning through this, both through the normal transformation that's happening because of major higher education disruptions, as well as COVID. So Talbot School of Theology, for instance, here at Biola University, they've had several ideation sessions, and we facilitate those with some external, internal people. You know, they're on Zoom, they go into breakout rooms for like tighter groups about brainstorming. And some of the ideas that have come from these faculty discussions would have never happened otherwise. So I think that the forced changes upon higher education in the last year they've stressed certainly all of us in ways we didn't imagine, but they've also helped us think more creatively. And that's been a bright spot here at Biola these past few months.
Thank you. I have one more question, but before I get to it, I want to invite all the participants to, if you have a question you'd like to follow up with what we've already discussed or something new, put your question in the chat box, and we'll get to that in just a few moments, maybe after this last question I asked the panelists. So put your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to you shortly. Sort of continuing on the hopeful theme, lots of changes, theological education. Dan Elshire's new book is already being much discussed hither and yon about the things that he's been talking about for years, the move towards more formation, from professionalization to formation, and many others, for example. What do you see, and what are you hoping for theological education in the future, so that we could kind of listen into you talking together about this, both in your institution, as you've heard your colleagues, your institutional leaders talk about this, but also yourself. So what are you hoping for in terms of the future of theological education? Abson, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so I think two things. The model that we have adopted when we started 11 years ago, in terms of being online, we did that because we wanted to serve the students where they were. And I think what has happened is that, COVID is creating a situation where more and more this is something that we're becoming more aware of. But what's happening is that the context of where the students are, that context now is constantly changing more than ever. And our faculty have worked really well in terms of adapting. But I think then in terms of theological education, the capacity to adapt, the capacity to listen and pay attention, and to allow the students' context to influence what it is that we're doing. This is again the idea of formation, right? It's the idea of not just coming and then having, let me put it differently, how do we create a process within theological education that's flexible enough, that's adaptive enough, that our students will find it relevant? And that's kind of the big picture, because it will be different for different contexts. We also do a lot of things globally. So not just how do we here in the US impact what's happening globally, but also allowing the global context to inform what we do, so that there's this symbiotic relationship that's happening in the context of theological education, because ultimately we want to serve the church.
Very good, thank you. Ellen, how about you?
I think that this is starting to happen and is a very positive thing that, as Abson says, more of our students are staying right where they are in their context. And so for faculty to point students to partners in their community, to join them, to help them in practical theology kinds of issues, but also to teach them how to partner with agencies in their community, organizations that are already doing things well, maybe groups that are already organized well for racial reconciliation, or to address other issues in that unique location, be it in the United States or internationally. But I'd love for faculty to model through the curriculum that beyond the required resources for reading in the syllabus, there are also going to be required interactions with leaders in the community to build those partnerships.
Yeah, let me pick up that baton. I was going to actually answer it in a different way, but I'm going to pick up that baton from Ellen, because I think she's really onto something there. I mean, we can talk about changes to higher education that are coming with new modalities and multiple price points, and financial modeling and flexibility. But I actually think my bigger concern is in this world where there seems to be sharper edges and sharper elbows and sharper tongues than ever before, that it's difficult to be in congregational leadership with all of the polarization and the vitriol and the divisiveness around any number of issues, be it politics or race or immigration or whatever it might be. And I've been saying recently, as those at Biola can attest to, that the graduates at Biola, at Talbot School of Theology, we want them to graduate with what we would say a firm center and soft edges. And traditional seminary education is focused on the firm center, like knowledge acquisition and skills development, and thinking biblically and Christianly about ways in which we kind of know truth, certainly grounded in the truth of Scripture. But just the need for more of a greater emphasis on spiritual formation and growth in character, and helping our graduates be able to navigate the divisiveness of our world. It's harder than ever. And I think if we focus on the firm center, but not the soft edges, I'm like hospitality and kindness and listening, and a life of charity and grace. And how does that flow out of the fruit of the Spirit? And that needs to be very intentional in theological education, maybe more now than ever, both because of rising generation and maybe what their background was, as well as the growing, I think, just like dis-ease in culture and politics. So the spiritual formation component in theological education, integrated certainly with the traditional knowledge acquisition dimension, is needed now more than ever with our graduates, because otherwise, you don't want them to get burnt out, and I'm hearing too many stories of that happening these days.
Mm. Well, we have some great questions from folks who are listening or viewing, and I'll just say right now, we're not going to get to all of them, but we could be here all day and it'd be a great conversation. Let's start with something from our brother Dave Bushart. Thank you for the question about shared governance. I'm assuming that each of your institutions has some take on shared governance. I'm going to turn Dave's question a little bit sideways and say, has the pandemic, as Barry, you said earlier, it's an accelerant, it's also a revealer, it sort of reveals things too. What kinds of discussions are you having regarding shared governance? Is it more of the same pre-pandemic? Is it new things? Barry, why don't we start with you first?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of alluded to it earlier, Donald, but like we need to do this more, and the pandemic has made it more difficult. So our board of, the three constituencies in shared governance, obviously the board of trustees that has the ultimate authority, the office of the president, which is the senior administrators have the functional authority of really running the institution, fulfilling the mission of the institution, and then the faculty have a delegated authority, right? They're delegated on curriculum, on advancement in rank and promotion, tenure, educational policy. So when all that works together well, it is a good thing, but it requires intercommunication. And I think where I've felt it the most is that we've had to make some hard financial decisions this year because we haven't been open. We don't have students living on campus, and we have 4,000 undergraduate students. And when they're not here, which they're not, it has a financial impact. And so that financial impact trickles down and affects programs, it affects schools, it affects, your retirement fund, whatever it might be. And so there can be that natural like erosion of trust and understanding of shared governance. So that has been a challenge for us of not being together. So we are working at our next board meeting, which is virtual in May, and our board meeting will be physically present in September, of more of the voices of the faculty. This is what it's been like for faculty to teach this year, because I don't think our board fully understands. And I think our faculty doesn't fully understand maybe even our board during the pandemic. And so we've got to continually reignite those conversations. And that's been a challenge.
Okay. Ellen or Abson, you have a comment about this one? Because I'm going to try to popcorn our way through a couple other questions here.
I think what it did was giving us an opportunity to really live it out because of the changes that we had to make, and in the context of Wesley Seminary, there were financial implications. So what we did was, instead of thinking about what do we do about costs, we had to have a conversation about, okay, how do we do theological education differently? So what it did, then we brought the faculty together and having conversations about what are processes that we needed to change, what are ways of operating that we needed to do, so that it wasn't just what do we do to survive next year? How do we actually create a reality where we can thrive beyond this year? And it gave us a great opportunity to have those conversations.
That reminds me of a question that we've been asking for a little while now, but my guess is it's picking up steam as hopefully pandemic goes down, vaccines go up, we get well again. And that is, what did we learn that we want to keep? We may have already been going that way anyway, but what do we learn that we want to keep in any kind of a way in the system? Anybody have any thoughts about that one?
Well, from the faculty perspective, definitely to keep our curiosity alive about how to teach, how, we have our particular fields of study that everybody's drilled deeply into, but not necessarily the best way to communicate or to have students experience and participate in that field of study. So certainly want those conversations to continue.
We have to, I think what we were learning is the question that we've been asking, that is, what do we need to change in order to remain the same? Because I think the remaining the same is the missional part. The change is like, we've got to do some things differently. Again, not taking our eye off what our mission is, but putting lots of things on the table to say, how can we accomplish it differently? That has to be in our culture going forward, Donald.
I think learning to adapt from a place of strength as opposed to weakness. What I mean by this is, in the context of Wesley Seminary, again, because we're already online, the challenge for us was, what do we do now? The challenge was, how do we now change from a position of strength to say, oh, well, we're online, it's not a problem, but what could we do better? How could we be better? And adapt from that, which then allow us to think more long-term.
Okay, thanks. Totally different question from one of our PhD students here at Trinity. He's a brother from Kenya. He's wondering about the movement towards international partnerships that was already happening, kind of well underway pre-pandemic. I guess, how is that going? Did it stop? Did it go faster? Did it take a turn in your institution from where you all sit in your various roles?
For us, in terms of our context, Wesley Seminary, Indiana Wesleyan University is, there are 5 what we call the We5 institutions, and one of them is in Canada. There are 5 Wesleyan universities, and one of them is in Canada. So we continue to have conversations, depending on where the partnership was. If a partnership was just at its beginning, it's very difficult to start a partnership with a global school, international school online. Like nothing replaces sitting face to face, being in a meeting, being able to read the room, thinking about like the context. So for those that we haven't had a face-to-face conversation, we had to kind of pause. But for places where the understanding and the face-to-face had already happened, we continue to have those conversations and thinking about, okay, how do we continue to move things forward? We have a partnership with a school in Rwanda, and because we're there already, so we continue to have monthly meetings in terms of strategic meetings in terms of how do we advance that partnership. We had plans for Philippines, but those things we've put on hold because that face-to-face really is really important before you engage in further conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, one last final comment, maybe from each of you. Hopeful comment. This is in the commending category. Scripture speaks a lot about commending one to another. What's an encouragement that you want to offer from your seat to the folks in other seats as we continue to get to the end of the pandemic, Lord willing, and as we see what unfolds in his kindness in the future? I know we talked about hope for theological education. I think I'm thinking more broadly now. Just maybe a word of hope toward one another and towards the folks in the group, and as well as our institutions.
I may reiterate what I said earlier, Donald, and not long ago, I bumped into a professor out in the sidewalk here, and she pointed me to the Stockdale Paradox, and basically means we need to talk about hope and reality when collaborating during times like these. And you may know the paradox about this POW who basically said he had to continue in that concentration camp, being hopeful, but also confronting the brutal realities. And just like there are some tough days that are still coming. And productive change begins when we confront the hard facts with enduring hope. And it's not one or the other, but it's both. So So live fully into both. That would be my hopeful comment.
Great. Thanks, Barry.
I think for me, it would be just encouragement along this line of connection. More than ever, we're asking, how do we connect well and faithfully and meaningfully with each other? And that question might have gotten a little lost in the shuffle of just being an institution and doing education. Now it's on the forefront of everybody's mind. And what a faithful question to ask, to just keep that priority of good connections.
Sure. Thanks. Abson, how about you?
Yeah, I think mine will go with relational in terms of, and thank you very much, Greg and Dawn, for bringing us together. And so speaking as the one from the middle, the need for us to care for one another, the need for us to be hopeful and trust one another, both in terms of trusting each role, the president in terms of the challenges that they face, in terms of the hard decisions that they need to make, and ourselves as deans, what it means to be in the middle and learning to both care and communicate well, and as faculty, showing the appreciation for the work that they do, and together being good co-steward of what God has blessed us with, because it's about the students, and beyond that, it's about the people they serve, the church, and working well together for what God has called us to do, which is the mission.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. If there's ever a time for generous judgment, it's now, and you guys have really modeled that for us in the conversation. So thanks so much. Before we're completely finished, I'm going to turn it back over to Greg.
Thanks, Donald, and our thanks to everyone on the panel. It was a really rich conversation. I've got this wonderful array of quotes from things you said that I've been jotting down in order to share this video with others in our network. The video will be going up soon. I want to invite you as we close to join us in 2 future opportunities. Since we have so many more questions we didn't get a chance to get to, we will have plenty of opportunities for more conversation. One is our next webinar, which will be April 15, and the title of that is Embracing the Slash After COVID. That slash refers to the slash that we increasingly find in our job titles as we have teaching responsibilities and various other kinds of responsibilities. So we will have 3 slashers, if you'll forgive me for calling them that, to discuss the role of having different roles in theological education. We'll have Scott Ray from Biola. Since we thought Biola did so well, we'll have another Biola folk in here. Jesse Swigert from Covenant Theological Seminary, and Philip Thompson from Sioux Falls Seminary will be talking about embracing the slash after COVID. So look forward to that. That's April 15, and it is at the same time this webinar was, which is 11 Central, noon Eastern, and 9 Pacific. Our other opportunity we have is our annual gathering, which is happening once again as we look forward with hope, trusting in the Lord's providence to a time when we can meet in person. We have our annual Karam Forum gathering, and it will be happening this November 18 to 19. Happens immediately after ETS and immediately before AAR. It'll be in Fort Worth. And so you can join us live and in person in Fort Worth and actually shake people's hands and see them face to face and be part of that with the speakers and the conversation. But if you are not able to join us in Fort Worth, we will also have the Zoom participation option available. So you don't have to miss out on Karam Forum if you're not able to be with us in Fort Worth. So we're going to carry that modality forward even as we return to incarnational relation. And on that note, thanks again, everyone, for being here. It was a fantastic conversation, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. So see you then. Thanks.